The 1044 is brought to you by Chevron Delo 600 ADF Ultra Low Ash Diesel Engine Oil. It's time to kick some ash. This week on the 1044, are you sampling your engine oil? If not, your engine may be trying to tell you something, and it's about time you started listening. Hey everybody, and welcome to the 1044, a weekly webisode from the editors here at CCJ. I'm Jason Cannon, and my co-host on the other side is Matt Cole. Engine oil sampling is a maintenance best practice that in many cases I think is misunderstood. Many technicians think if they're not looking to stretch their oil drain interval, there's really no need to sample on a regular basis.
But that couldn't be further from the truth. A high-quality engine oil sample provides insight into the health of the lubricant itself, contaminants within the engine, and the overall engine condition.
Oil samples can reveal the kind of warning signs that enable carriers to fix problems before they lead to downtime and more costly repairs. We spoke to Chevron Senior Staff Engineer Sean Whitaker to get his thoughts on how and why fleets who aren't sampling should. And it's not really as complex as you might think. But before we hear from Sean, let's hear from the sponsor of the 1044, Chevron Lubricants. Protecting your diesel engine and its after-treatment system has traditionally been a double-edged sword. The same engine oil that is so essential to protecting your engine's internal parts is also responsible for 90% of the ash that is clogging up your DPF and upping your fuel and maintenance costs. Outdated industry thinking still sees a trade-off between engine and emission system protection, and Chevron was tired of it. So they spent a decade of R&D developing a no-compromise formulation. Chevron Lubricants developed a new ultra-low ash diesel engine oil that is specifically designed to combat DPF ash clogging. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology cuts sulfate ash by a whopping 60%, which reduces the rate of DPF clogging and extends DPF service life by 2.5 times. And just think what you can do with all the MPGs you're going to add from cutting your number of regens. But Delo 600 ADF isn't just about after-treatment. It provides complete protection, extending drain intervals by preventing oil breakdown. Before you had to choose between protecting your engine or your after-treatment system, and now you don't. 600 ADF from Delo with OmniMax technology, it's time to kick some ash.
You know, one of the biggest misconceptions about used oil analysis is that it's only utility is to provide information about extending oil drains. And while oil analysis is a critical component to evaluating oil life and helping set up proper maintenance intervals, it's equally helpful in diagnosing potential issues within the engine. In fact, I've often found that that's even the bigger utility of oil analysis. It can tell you early on about the possibility of coolant leaks, issues with air filtration, maybe even about injectors that are bleeding fuel into the crankcase or not offering good combustion and putting a bunch of soot into the oil. I think once you become familiar with the broad variety of information that is offered via the oil analysis, the more you can kind of warm up to its various utilities.
Having data is great, but unless your technicians have a master's degree in chemistry, figuring out what to do with it can seem like a challenge, especially when you're dealing with a lot of the science and formulation involved in engine oils. But Sean says most providers have done a lot of work to take the guesswork and intimidation out of the process.
The whole process of oil analysis can feel daunting up front, but I think what you'll find is that a lot of the providers have really streamlined the process. So they've provided sampling kits that not only include the valve that you use to interface with the engine itself to take the sample, but sample bottles that include prepaid mailing labels. And so really just becomes a matter of taking the sample, making sure that there's good supporting data for that sample, which includes the mileage at which it was taken, the type of oil that's used, as well as information about the unit that the sample came from. All of that is critical information, but then once that gets sent off, the sample gets analyzed, and there's a wonderful suite of electronic tools available these days that really simplify the process from there on out. When I first started dealing with this maybe 25 years ago, you'd have to wait for a report to come in the mail, and then it would just be a paper printout. The internet has revolutionized the way that it works today. There's apps, there's websites, there's various electronic tools that chart this information and really simplify that process and make it a much better utility today than it's ever been.
Carriers that don't have a dedicated shop can still execute a sampling program. Sean says most third-party service providers have some sort of laboratory partner, and the sampling labs will work alongside the fleet to build out a course of action if one's needed.
There's a lot of fleets that do utilize third parties, so whether it be truck stops, OEM dealer distributors, oil marketers themselves. And I think you'd be surprised if you engage with them that there are likely to be avenues that they have partnered with oil analysis providers to offer that as a bundled service in addition to the actual maintenance event itself. That really simplifies the process because a lot of fleets aren't returning home to the same central location for their maintenance events, but allows them to have a kind of a turnkey approach to doing oil analysis, regardless of where those service events happen. I think when any operator first takes on a used oil analysis program, it can be kind of daunting to kind of sort through all the various information that is provided about the sample. But once you get a little bit more familiar with it, it can actually provide a lot of insight. And many of the oil analysis providers take that extra step and help you interpret the information. So they provide a bit of an action plan that kind of recognizes the significance of the various readings and kind of provides a little bit of a diagnosis. Even if that diagnosis is everything is okay, that's a good thing. But if there are things that are watch points, they'll signal that. It's pretty rare that you need to take action based upon a single reading. It's something that more often we look at over time as part of a trend analysis. And a lot of times the first recommendation from the provider is to resample at some other fixed interval and watch to see if that trend continues, because that's a confirming indicator that something's going wrong and may, at that point, prompt the need for preventative action.
If you're concerned that a used oil analysis is just a method by service providers and oil companies to sell you more services, Sean says you need to look into getting a better partner, because it's not about that at all.
Certainly the way I look at oil analysis, it's a bundle of kind of a service offering that your oil provider offers. And it's more than just offering a product, but and I know here at Chevron that the majority of our customers are running a business, and the way we look at it is the product is just one component of what we're offering that end user customer. Information about the way your fleet operates, insight into the best ways to optimize your maintenance events, and to provide insight about what might be going on with your engine before it's too late, I think are all very critical components to what used oil analysis can offer. If you're working with somebody who's only using it to upsell, you're best looking for another provider.
So what does an oil analysis even look for, and what does it all even mean? Sean's a chemical engineer at heart, and asking him this question was a lot like asking a chef how to make their world-famous sauce.
Some of the core properties that are measured on an engine oil, there's the metals, right? So that's really one big thing. So it tells you some insight about the additive metals that are used. We use a lot of metallic components in oils that can be picked up and kind of represent the fingerprint of the oil, if you will. But in addition, that also allows you to look for metals that are coming from the engine, whether those be from wear or corrosion, to provide insight about some of those processes. In addition to components that may be coming from other fluids within the engine, so things like sodium and potassium derived from coolants, all of these things help guide the interpretation. So in addition to metals, another very common thing to measure is viscosity, right? So that's another reason why it's important to understand what viscosity grade you're using. That kind of level sets on what the fresh oil viscosity and any changes over time to that viscosity, whether it be getting thicker because of oxidation or accumulation of soot, or sometimes it becomes thinner through accumulation of fuel dilution or other contaminants that thin out the fluid. There's other kind of chemical analyses that are done. One of the ones that's become more and more in focus recently as it relates to oil health is oxidation and nitration. engines today run a bit hotter. They demand more of the oil, and so oxidation is a parameter which is used to track whether the oil is breaking down over time, and is one of the key indicators for the need for an oil change.
That's it for this week's 1044. You can read more on ccjdigital.com, and as always, you can find the 1044 each week on CCJ's YouTube channel. And if you've got questions, comments, criticisms, or feedback, hit us up at 1044trucking@gmail.com or give us a call at 404-491-1380. And until next week, everybody stay safe.